Have you ever sat down at your favorite desk to ponder if there has ever been a time when the Great Depression, gravel roads, a savvy businessman who ain't afraid to get his hands dirty, and Nam have all colluded to give a large population of people cancer and potential birth defects? Well, ponder no more, for I have the answer you seek right here. Sit tight, because this is a long and fascinating story. Our story begins and ends in Times Beach, Missouri. In 1925, the St. Louis Times ran a promotion in which you could buy a subscription to the paper for the low price of $67.50. That already sounds like a lot for a newspaper now, but adjusted for inflation, that's right about $1,000. However, the subscription also came with a nifty entire plot of land on the banks of the Merrimack River, so that's a pretty nice bonus, I'd say. Many semi-rich people purchased the subscription and its bonus property and built summer houses on it. Well, the property, not the subscription. Unless. However, soon after, a depression swept by that was the absolute lord of all depressions. The second homes were a luxury most of the people that owned them couldn't afford, so they sold them to poor people for pennies on the dollar, as they say. The new inhabitants of Times Beach became a tight-knit family and a strong community, despite all being very poor. And you know what poor people can't really afford is nice asphalt for their roads. This meant the roads they had to create had to be cheaper, gravel. And as anyone who lives on a gravel road knows, they real dusty. Almost as dusty as another dust-related event happening at the time. And nobody likes to have gravel dust all over their house and yard, so they had to take care of it. The most common way to tame the dust devil at the time was to cover the whole road with oil. Just keeping the dust down. So they would have people from the community do this from time to time to keep the road dust off their houses. Meanwhile, nearby in Vietnam, America and those dirty commies were locked in a ferocious battle. One of the most notable features of Vietnam is its beautiful jungle, which happened to provide a great hiding place for the Viet Minh soldiers and is not particularly easy to get through for the inexperienced Americans. Their solution was to destroy the forest with a toxic chemical known as Agent Orange. At first, you might think this could be the name of an almost mediocre spy movie featuring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson being a spy in a jumpsuit that highlights his large pecs, but you would be wrong. They would spray this chemical all over the jungle, and this stuff is nasty. If it can turn this into this, you could guess it does some pretty nasty stuff to people as well. Some of the effects of exposure to Agent Orange are chloracne, a skin disease that's similar to really bad acne, and some very unfortunate birth defects. The main chemical that causes these effects is dioxin, which was then considered the most dangerous chemical in the world. Back in Missouri, there was a company called Nepico that manufactured Agent Orange during Nam. I already told you about the effects of dioxin, but the scary thing was they took nearly all of it out of the Agent Orange before shipping it off. The waste dioxin was stored in giant pools and tanks, but this dioxin never breaks down, and it was incredibly dangerous just sitting there, wafting its foul funk into the air. The top option to get rid of it was to dump it into an incinerator, but Karen forgot to bring it to work that day. Daggum Karen. So they decided to hire someone to haul it off for them. Enter Russell Bliss. He was paid $125 per load to haul away the incredibly toxic dioxin. The thing was, Bliss had no clue anything was wrong with this chemical. He just took it home, mixed it with some motor oil, and put it tanks in his barn. He even buried some in the ground, just because. Pretty soon, Bliss had more of this dioxin oil concoction than he knew what to do with. However, that's when the Times Beach residents and their dusty roads came knocking at the figurative door. Oh, wrong video. For several years, Bliss sprayed oil all over Times Beach's 23 miles of gravel roads. No one ever noticed they were slowly being poisoned. Until one day in 1971, when the owners of a nearby horse stable hired Bliss to spray their horse arena. After a couple months, all the horses there just straight up died. When the exact same thing happened to another stable Bliss had sprayed, the owners blamed it on Bliss. That led to everyone finally discovering what Bliss had been doing with his dioxin for years. It took about a decade of testing, mostly due to some politics and legal hoo-ha that I don't care about, but in 1982 it was determined that Times Beach did indeed have a whole heck of a lot more than dioxin than it should. Just days after a disastrous flood, every single resident was forced to evacuate for their own safety. As you would imagine, Bliss got in huge trouble. However, he mostly avoided a bunch of lawsuits because he claimed he didn't really know there was dioxin in the chemical waste he had hauled off from Nepico. In fact, he claims he didn't even know what dioxin was. To prove his point, in one of his trials, Bliss stuck his finger in a jar of dioxin and licked the dioxin off his finger like it was jelly. I don't think it's as dangerous as you say it is. What a legend. Anyway, after all that, the government said uncle and created a huge incinerator in the area, dug up everything in the town, and burned it, down to the dirt. After that, they decided to build a state park on the land, which is the obvious first choice for what to do on the site of a chemical disaster. In the end, Bliss might have been right. Dioxin is definitely nasty stuff, and the Times Beach residents were definitely affected, but it seems like they were evacuated before the really bad stuff started happening. Nobody developed chloracne or extreme birth defects or anything like it was feared. The moral of the story, kids, is as follows. Always make sure to properly dispose of your chemical waste. Don't take mystery chemicals from strangers. Try not to get in a conflict in the middle of a jungle, and just don't spray cancer-causing chemicals all over town. Bye.
Fate of the world, rest of my weeks, it might be scary, but it seems no one wants to take the